Maayad-ayad nga aga sa tanan. Sa tanan nga nag-attend sa diri nga seminar sa aton nga IP education. Kag sa tanan nga nagatambong sa tanan nga adlaw, have a blessed morning and welcome. So the topic is about history of IP education in the Philippines, the legal and policy foundation of DO62 series of 2011. Ako gali si Miss Josephine C from Haniway 1. My topic for today have three session objectives. The first objective is to present timeline and highlight significant events in the history of Philippine IP education. Second, discuss the historical implication of the development of Philippine IP education and recognition of IP rights. Third, develop insights on efforts, mechanisms, initiatives, and milestones of Philippine IP education. The historical perspective on the development of policies. Let us begin during the colonization era. We have the Spanish regime. The words that we're going to remember during this time is marginalization and annihilation. And next period is the American Republic. We have also to keep in mind the words assimilation and thomicides. Third, the Philippine Constitution. And we have to remember Mother America, a living story of democracy. And to the present, we have the EPRA law and self-determination. During the Spanish regime, Filipinos are tagged as Indios, wild tribes, uncivilized, pagan, infeliz, and inutile. And during this time also, Filipinos experience what we call marginalization and annihilation. During this time, Filipinos were driven out from their own lands. And also, the Spanish regime implemented what we call Regalian Doctrine. In Regalian Doctrine, all lands belong to the state. Filipinos don't own their own land. And after that, Education Decree of 1963 was established. This is the first educational system for students established that focused on Christian doctrine. American period. During the American period, the Filipino people experienced what we call cultural assimilation. Cultural assimilation occurs when an ethnic minority sacrifices its own culture to integrate into a society. Just like, for example, the way our Filipino people wear their clothes before. As you can see, some wear bahags, and some wear also putong, or what we call the traditional clothes. And later on, Filipino copy and adopt the way our colonizers wear their clothes. The Americans instill in our mind that we will make you like us, and what is West is the best. So Western education, it instilled in our mind that anything local belongs to the lowest class. And during this time, in American period, they implemented what we call Land Registration Act of 1902, torrent system, and the education by the Thomicides. The Thomicides are the first teachers that came in the Philippines that introduces American education to the Philippines. Okay. During this time, education was not responsive and reflective of the IP's culture and holistic world views. And also, they instilled in our mind that we will make you like us, you understand us, adjust to us, integrate to us, make yourselves like us. So the government attempts to address the continuing struggle of identity and recognition of the IP rights. The government created the agencies such as Bureau of Non-Christian Tribes, or the BNCT of 1917, Commission of National Integration, or the CNI, which was created by the Republic Act 1888. Under Republic Act 1888, the indigenous peoples were officially introduced as the national cultural minorities. And also, the Presidential Assistance to National Minorities, o the PANANIM, in 1975. Next is the provision of an ancestral domain, self-determination, and indigenous peoples' right, peoples first mentioned in 1987 Constitution. Also, the government created the Office of Muslim Affairs and Cultural Communities, or the OMACC. The OSCC, the NCIP, was created and established through the Republic Act 8371 in 1997 up to the present. So those are the different attempts of the government to address the continuing struggle for identity of our IP rights. But despite the efforts of our government, the IP continued to live under the colonizers' framework of development, historical and institutional injustice. For so long, the indigenous peoples continued to struggle for recognition, inclusion, and participation. And then, later on, this legal and policy foundation of DO 62 series of 2011 was created. Our Philippine Constitution. In 1935 Philippine Constitution, Article 14, Section 5, it emphasizes about free primary instruction, academic freedom, nationalism, moral character, and civic consciousness. To answer the struggle of our cultural community, together with the Department of Education, Legal and Policy Foundation of DO 62 series of 2011 was created. The basis of this in our Philippines Constitution are based on 1935 Philippine Constitution, Article 15 series of 2005, which it gives more importance on free primary instruction, academic freedom, nationalism, moral character, and civic consciousness. Also, in 1973 Constitution, Article 15, Section 8, it gives emphasis on complete, adequate, and integrated education relevant to national development. And also, in 1987 Constitution, Article 16, series of 2000, Section 12, recognizes the traditional right of indigenous cultural communities or people over their lands. This gave a little push for the term self-determination and legal foundation for the passage of Republic Act 8371, or the EPRA of 1997. It gives more focus on recognition of ancestral domain or land, self-determination, cultural integrity, and traditions of indigenous people. And on Article 14, Section 2 and 17, it further the state shall recognize, respect, and protect the rights of indigenous cultural communities to preserve and develop their cultures, traditions, and institutions. It shall consider their rights in the formulation of the national plans and policies. So this is one of the efforts of the government to involve and to make our cultural community be part of our government and society. On Article 2, Section 22, the state recognizes and promotes the rights of the indigenous cultural communities within the framework of national unity and development. So now the government involved our cultural minority in all the plans that the government will prepare for the people of our country. National and international legislation. It specifies the system and access to education. So it gives way to our people that they can be part of the system and they can access education. So the DepEd to develop and institute alternative system for education for children of cultural communities with culture-specific, relevant to the needs and existing situation in their. In national and international legislation, our DepEd developed and institute alternative system education for children in a cultural community with a culture-specific, relevant to the needs and existing situation of their communities. And also, this national and international legislation accredit and support non-formal but functional programs conducted by the NGO in the said communities. Also, our international conventions, or the ILO in 169 Convention, is concerned in our indigenous tribal peoples, and it is adopted on June 1989. Also, it was revised, the ILO was revised, ILO 107 of 1957, which promote the protection of IPs. And some international convention on civil and political rights, Article 27, gives importance on the right to enjoy one's culture. Also, they are given the rights to participate on their own religion, and they are given the rights to practice their own language. This UN Convention and the Rights of the Child, or the IP Child, focuses on education, human rights, environmental protection, ancestral domain, and also education shall be directed to the full development of personality and to the strengthening of respect for human rights and fundamental freedoms. It shall promote understanding, tolerance, and friendship among all nations, racial or religious groups, and shall further the activities of the United Nations for the maintenance of peace. Also, those are the steps of the national or the international agencies to support the cultural communities, especially for children. Now, the birth of EFRA law. So the EFRA law recognizes, protects, and promotes the rights of the cultural communities and the IPs. It gives importance on their ancestral domain, their cultural integrity, their self-governance, their empowerment, their human rights, their social justice, their self-determination as IP communities. What are the provisions of education in EFRA? So the state shall, through NCIP, provide a complete, adequate, and integrated system of education relevant to the needs of the children, of young people, of cultural community. That is specifically on Section 28. The state shall provide equal access to various cultural opportunities to the cultural communities and the IPs through the education system, public or private cultural entities, scholarships, grants, and other incentives without prejudice to their institution by providing education in their own language in a manner appropriate to their cultural methods of teaching and learning. That is why right now in education, we are using what we call mother tongue-based learning. We have contextualization, and also we have what we call indigenization of our lesson plans. And that indigenous children or youth shall have the right to all levels and forms of education of the states. So if given our cultural community, especially to all people that belongs in a community or IP community, equal rights to other Filipino children when it comes to education. Section 31. The state shall endeavor to have the dignity and diversity of cultures, traditions, history, and aspiration of the ICCs and the IPs, appropriately reflected in all forms of education. Public information and cultural education exchange, and also it ensures participation appropriate indigenous leaders in the schools and communities, and intergenerational cooperative undertakings to promote and enhance their distinctive heritage and values. So our government and our DepEd ensures that they have what we call participation in community and in our school. Through the effort of our government, together with the Department of Education, and to the goal that is, ang goal natin is education for all. That is why National Indigenous People Education Policy Framework, DO 62 Series of 2011 was created. This DO 62 Series of 2011 aims to an education that will recognize, protect, promote the rights and welfare of ICCs and IPs, equip them with the knowledge and skills needed to face various social realities and challenges, and also in line with the country's commitment to achieve education for all and in pursuit of BESRA of primary education for all. So following the intention of EPRA, as well as the principles enshrined in the Governance of Basic Education Act of 2001, Republic Act 9155, all DepEd offices and units are enjoined to effectively communicate this policy framework to all concerned stakeholders in their respective areas of concern. And in this DepEd Order, DO 62 Series of 2011, it recognized the faults of the past. It is an invitation for us to change our perspectives. The glasses that we normally use to see reality and exchange that and with a perspective that allows us to really be inclusive. Furthermore, it is an invitation to learn, not just teach in indigenous communities that we have always been in the sidelines. So this is Awakening, the DO 62 Series of 2011, that we should recognize what we have done wrong before in our educational system. And this is one way of telling us that we should change the way we look our educational system and towards our IP communities, especially to our IP learners. Let us be inclusive. Let us involve them and let them join in our school and in our society. And also, we must learn. We teachers must not only teach, but at the same time, if we are assigned in IP communities, we should also learn from them. We should learn about them so that we could have an effective way of teaching and educating our learners. So this DepEd, it was education which was used to marginalize, annihilate, assimilate, and exclude the indigenous people. Remember, during those colonization era, during the Spanish regime and American regime, they teach us in a different way that we cannot even recognize our own self as Filipinos. This time, we should also use education to correct this kind of mistake. Therefore, education shall be the right way to correct the faults of the past. Thank you very much. And once again, I'm Josephine C of Haniway 1. Good day, everyone, and mabuhay IP education.